Hi, welcome to this video on the present simple. So by the end of this video, you'll know when we use the present simple and you'll know how to form the present simple for positive sentences, negatives, and questions. Now, before you start watching the video, I want you to think about where you are. Are you ready? Do you have pen and paper ready? Is it an area where you can write down notes? You can hear what you're listening to. Okay, so we shall move on to the first slide. So we're going to look at some examples in this slide. Okay, so first one, my mum is a doctor. So is used in the present simple. Does she wake up early? Which words are used in present simple here? So we've got does and wake. So that's a question. Yes, she does. She wakes up at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. is really early. So we've got she wakes is using present simple. Okay, do you live with your mum? Do you live? No, I don't. She lives quite close though. So all of these sentences use the present simple. So that's what we're looking at today. Okay, we're going to look at the uses for the present simple. So there are 3 reasons for using the present simple. Do you know what they are? Any guesses for any of them? Okay, so the first reason for using present simple is for things which are generally or always true. The second reason is for repeated actions or habits. And the third reason is for permanent situations. So these are situations or things which you see is lasting for a very long time. Okay, so we'll look at some examples and how they match the reasons for using the present simple. My mum is very energetic. So this is something which I think is generally or always true. You could also use things like my mum is very kind. My mum is tall. You could use it for sentences not just about your mum. So it could be about geography or science. So for example, Singapore is in Asia. Would be for geography. For science, the sun rises in the east. So these are things which are generally or always true. You could also use it, for example, the chair is yellow. There are 10 chairs in the room. Okay, the next reason we use the present simple is for repeated actions or habits. So, for example, does she wake up early is a question. The answer, yes, she does. She wakes up at 5 a.m. So she wakes up at 5 a.m. It's not just once, it's not just twice, it's a habit. She does it almost every day. So maybe Monday to Friday, she wakes up at 5 a.m. You can use it for other repeated actions or habits. So for example, I leave my house at 7:30 in the morning. I get home at 6 o'clock in the evening. Every Saturday I play football. So these are things that happen many, many times, not just once. And the third reason is for permanent situations. So we got a question. Do you live with your mum? No, I don't. She lives quite close though. So this is something you see staying the same way for a long, long time. It's not going to change soon. So she lives quite close though. She lives close to me now. She'll live close to me next week, next month, next year, probably in 5 years' time. So I see it lasting for a really long time. So in English, the verb changes depending on the subject. Let me say that again because this doesn't happen in every language. So for example, in Chinese, this doesn't happen. So maybe English seems a little crazy for you right now, and that's okay because it is. Okay, in English, the verb changes depending on the subject. Why it changes, I have no idea. That's just the way it is. Okay, so we say, I like, you like, we like, they like. But we say, he likes, she likes, it likes. So for he, she, it, we add an S to the end of the verb. So like becomes likes. Okay, after verbs ending in S, SS, SH, ch, and o, we add es, the main verb, when we're using he, she, or it. So, for example, I push, he pushes. So we add es. I dress, he dresses. So again, adding es because it ends in ss for dress. I watch, he watches. I do, he does. Okay, so when it ends in s, ss, sh, ch, or o, you just add es for the third. This is called third person singular, where it's he, she, or it. Simple. Okay, so we're moving on to look at negatives and questions. Okay, she likes fish is a positive sentence. She doesn't like fish is a negative sentence. How do we know it is negative? Because this little nt, which means not. So sentences with not in are negative sentences. Questions have a question mark at the end. So a question mark is this thing here. So for example, does she like fish? Okay, how do we form them? So we looked at the positive sentences earlier. She likes fish. The negative sentence, she doesn't like fish. So we use the verb do in the negative way between the subject and the verb. So she doesn't like fish. Okay, so we've got she likes fish, she doesn't like fish. If it is I, it would be I don't like fish. D-O-N-T, don't like fish. Okay, so again, it would be he, she, it doesn't like fish, or I, you, we, they don't like fish. Okay, so that is for the negatives. For the questions, we've got does she like fish? So we take the helping verb do here and bring it to the front of the sentence. And it is generally positive. Then the subject comes from the front to second, and then the main verb. So does she like fish? So again, different subjects. Do you like fish? Do I like fish? Does she like fish? Does he like fish? Do they like fish? Do we like fish? So again, the verb do or does changes depending on the subject here. You'll notice like does not change. That is because do or does is changing already for us. Okay, does she like fish? Often we give a short answer to this question. So the best answer to give is, does she like fish? No, she doesn't. Sometimes students make the mistake of just saying no, yes. Once you've answered the question, it appears really rude. It's like you really don't want to speak to that person, okay? So you need to give a little bit more than just saying no, yes. So no, she doesn't. Yes, she does. You may also have the opposite situation, which is probably English teachers' faults, because sometimes people will say, no, she doesn't like fish. It's completely unnatural. You can just give a slightly short answer. No, she doesn't. Yes, she does. So it sounds very natural. Okay. You don't need to say like fish at the end. It's just repeating it unnecessarily. Looking now at yes, no questions. So the first thing you need to think about is, does a positive statement use the verb be? So in the present simple, that would be is, are, or am. And does it use a modal verb like can, could, should, must, might? So if you answer no, so there is no verb be, no modal verbs, you need to use a helping verb do to make the questions. If you have the verb be or you have a modal verb, you don't use do. Okay, so for example, in number 3 here, we got you work in the evenings. This is wrong because there is no verb do. Let's see if I can scratch that out. Red seems like a good color for it. So this is wrong. Okay, you cannot just add a question mark. Okay, so the correct thing, we need to use do. So do you work in the evenings? The reason for that is because we have no verb be here and no modal verb. Okay, looking at the other situation, if we got the verb be or modal verb in the positive statement, we don't use do. So for example, he is English. Is from the verb be. So be, we got is, are, or am. The question becomes, is he English? So notice he has moved from first to second. Is has moved from second to first. So you just change the order of the subject and the verb. So is he English? If it is you, in number 2 from earlier, we'd have you are English. The question you need to change over would be, are you English? Okay, so that is using the verb be in the sentence. The next one, he can work in the evenings. We've got a modal verb, can. Okay, so he can work in the evenings. Again, we just change the subject and verb order. So can comes to front, the subject he becomes second. So he can work in the evenings becomes, can he work in the evenings for the question. Okay, for WH questions, we're going to look at the 5 question words: who, what, where, when, and how. So for example, who manages Liverpool? Jurgen Klopp manages Liverpool. Who calls you at the weekend? My sister calls me at the weekend. Where do you live? I live close to the city centre. Who do you call at the weekend? I call my mum at the weekend. Okay, we'll look later on at the difference between this question, who do you call at the weekend, and who calls you at the weekend. In a moment, we're going to look at subject and object questions. Just before we do that, I just want to really quickly go through subject and object, because sometimes students don't really know what this means, and it's an idea you can get quite easily. Don't worry about if you're not aware of the exact meaning at the moment. Okay, if you know already, this should be simple for you. Just a refresher, make sure you answer the questions, make sure you're engaged. Okay, so the example sentence we got here, the cat sits on the mat in the morning. Every English sentence has a subject and a verb, and often has an object. So where is the verb in this sentence? Sits. So sits is the action. So that is the verb. The subject is the thing doing the action. So what sits? The cat sits. So the cat is the subject. The object is the thing affected by the action. So the object for now, I will just say on the mat in the morning. Okay, actually it could just be on the mat. Okay, but we'll just simplify it and say on the mat in the morning. Okay, so subject is the thing that does the action. Object is the thing affected by the action. We're going to go on to look at WH questions for subject questions and object questions. WH just means who, what, where, when, and H is how. Okay, who manages Liverpool? Who is asking about the person who does the action. Who actually does the action of managing Liverpool? Jurgen Klopp manages Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp is the one doing the action. Who calls you at the weekend? Who is asking about who does the action. For example, my sister calls me at the weekend. So that means my sister picks up her phone, presses in my number, blah, 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 blah. then gives me a call and my phone goes ding, 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 ding. I'm not sure why my phone sounds like that. I better go and get it checked out, but it does. Okay, so there it goes again. Okay, so that is for subject questions. For object questions, we use do or does as an auxiliary verb. So an auxiliary verb is just a helping verb. Where do you live? I live close to the city centre. So the answer, close to the city centre, is the object of the sentence. So that is why we use do in the question. Who do you call at the weekend? The answer, I call my mum at the weekend. The words in this sentence and this sentence are very similar. The meaning is the opposite. So I call my mum at the weekend means I pick up my phone, I press in my mum's number, and her phone goes ding, 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 ding. Again, she has a problem with her phone. So it's complete opposite to when my sister calls me at the weekend, because my sister picks up the phone. Okay, so that is why the object question has do in it. The subject question, there is no do in here. So the meaning can actually be quite different here. Okay, so just a quick recap. So I hope you've been listening. I hope you've been taking notes. If you can answer these questions, you're doing fine. If you're unsure about some of these questions, maybe you should watch the video again. If you can answer all of these questions, that's fantastic. Go on, try the quizzes, make sure you can apply the knowledge. Okay, so when do we use the present simple? There are 3 reasons. What are they? How do we form the present simple? So how do we write the present simple? Which subjects do we add s or es? So for example, for I, we, I forget the answer now. When do we add es to the verb? When we're using the 3rd person singular. What is the negative of I live in England? Write it down. What is a yes/no question when the answer to the question is yes, I do, I live in England? What is a WH question for the answer I live in England? So the answer is in England, so W will probably start with where. When do we use the verb do or modal verbs in questions? What is the difference between subject and object questions? Okay, if you can answer all of these questions, congratulations, you can be confident that you have the knowledge on how to use the present simple. The next step is for you to make sure you can apply it when you're producing your own sentences. So go ahead, go and try the quizzes, and remember, you need to use what you learn, otherwise it is useless. Have a great day.